Julian Carranza, a spectacular finish. Philadelphia Devils win. Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and it is days away from Philadelphia Union's home opener against the home opener of MLS against Orlando City for the Philadelphia Union. We have CONCACAF Champions League soccer going on. It started last night with LAFC and Colorado Rapids. We have Inter Miami Sporting Kansas City going on right now as we're recording this podcast. And as we always do, we've had José Nuñez on the last 2 months, month and a half. I don't know what it is, but I guess I should change his introduction to the latest MLS writer, the newest MLS writer, José Nuñez. José, how you doing?
I'm okay. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. I am on the road again. I know at this point I've done a show in San Francisco for you. I've done now a show in New York City right now. Have we done Seattle yet? We haven't done Seattle, no?
No, not yet.
The time difference would probably be a little difficult. It would be the same as San Francisco, though. So we should probably do that at some point, just to like continue to check off the different states and places. But I'm doing well, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm excited to contribute to MLS. I never expected that by a million miles when they reached out to get involved. So I'm really eager. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'll be in Denver, Colorado in a couple months. And so, maybe I should go live in there just so we can keep checking off these states. So just check off one state at a time. But as tonight's episode is, we're talking Bruno Damiani. It is now official with him signing from Nacional from Uruguay, $3.4 million record transfer fee by the Philadelphia Union. And José hit me up and said, you know what, why don't we bring on this guest, a guy who announced that Damiani was signing to the Philadelphia Union, and he is Daniel Solana. Solana, how you doing? Uh-oh. Mute it. Yep,
I'm sorry there. Good thing I was muted. It would have been a better introduction with what I'm about to go with. Well, I'm keeping warm, unlike my home team, Inter Miami, in those degrees out there in Kansas City. And I'm sure Jose in New York is freezing cold as well. But I've got my long sleeve so I can rep with you guys with the cold weather. And I'm excited to be on with you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you for hopping on. And I'm glad Jose said, we should hit up Solana because I think we've met one time when I was on with you and Danny from Better Terrans. And so now here you come on to the Free Kick. And like I said in the introduction, you're the one who broke this news officially. And I'm happy that Tom Brogert gave you your credit. I honestly, in my opinion, I did not think he was going to do it. Always hit or miss with seeing who he gives credit to. But, he did give you credit. And you had reported this late at night, I believe, Monday. And then Tuesday morning, you started seeing all the outlets down in Uruguay start reporting on this. All the outlets in Philadelphia started picking up on this. Jose, I think, reported on it at 7:30, got confirmation. But, yeah, I mean, you got the news first, Solana. How'd you feel being the very first person getting the news that Damiani was joining the Philadelphia Union?
First off, I was happy for Bruno because he was in a very tight battle with the current forward for Nacional, who is a Colombian forward named Diego Erazo. So they were in a tight battle all preseason. And there was rumblings that he was going to go over to Newell's for a sale for $2 million for 80% of his of his pass. At the end of the day, I'm glad that he didn't end up going to Newell's and that he's going to get an opportunity to star for the Philadelphia Union. So honestly, when I first heard the news, when it was passed along to me from my sources down in Uruguay, I was happy for him. I reached out to him. I told him, welcome to the United States. I'm happy for you. And, talking to Jose, I think it's going to be realistic to expect somewhere between 10 and 15 goals from Bruno this year. That's at least what I expect from him, knowing the background that he comes from and the type of player that he is. So, we can continue talking about him. I can throw stats out there for you. If by any chance I kind of glance up, it's because Inter Miami got scored on, guys, just to let you know.
Oh, no. Now you're muted.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say, Jose, I'll let you get the first question. So go ahead, Jose.
No, if first and foremost, I want to say, man, you made my life so interesting that morning. So I got text messages while I was sleeping, and I'm a father of two little guys. So like, come 11 o'clock at night, like I'm out till 5, 6 in the morning till I go running. So with the text messages were flooding in, and then once I read from you, I was like, oh, okay, so this is legit. Let me make some phone calls, and I was fortunate. The people I called answered. So it was such a nice treat to see, like, oh, okay, this is actually happening because it's a huge hole that I think the Philadelphia Union had in terms of needing a more versatile, a more agile, a more I don't want to say speedier because Mikel Ua is pretty speedy, but Mikel Ua is a north and south runner versus what Bruno can do, which is literally just move around the box and chase really, really well. I'm intrigued to hear from you, Solana. Is obviously he's fit, but how much is he going to have to adjust, do you think, based on his game to what MLS does? I have an idea in my mind. We know what Ernst Tanner thinks it's going to be like, but it's always nice to hear from other people who have watched him more than maybe any of us really have.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to fit in well. Like I said, his game is very similar to the MLS game. He's a typical young, hungry striker who is going to give you his full 120% no matter the amount of minutes that he played. I can tell you, last year when he played for Boston River, which is, not one of the top teams in Uruguay, he played over, 30 games, about 33 games with them. And he scored 12 goals, had 5 assists in the second half of the season because, the Uruguayan season is split between an apertura and a clausura. The clausura, the second half, is where he had his big moment where he started 14 games, had 9 goals and 2 assists, which is essentially basically almost 1.86 points per game, which is kind of a crazy number when you come to think about it. Now he comes to Nacional thinking that he's going to start. Unfortunately, for Nacional, I think they had to do it just based off of a business thing. They really wanted to keep him on the roster, but just like you guys said, 3.4 million is a lot of money for a South American team. And as you guys know, a lot of South American teams, except for the Brazilians and the Argentinians, suffer to maintain a budget. So that's one of the reasons that Nacional let him go, not because of anything else. So I don't think that it's, there's anything negative to say about this signing. I think it's only positive. Like I said, he's a young and hungry forward. He's going to give you 120%. Doesn't matter how many minutes he plays. And that's exactly what you want out of a striker in the MLS. Somebody who's going to pressure the forwards, high press all the time, go after every ball. And not only that, when he gets a chance inside the box, he's going to finish. And he's shown that he can do that in a league that I would say, and I might get hate on this, but to me, the Uruguayan league is probably around the same step as MLS, maybe a little bit underneath. But overall, the top tier teams in Uruguay would compete with the top tier teams in the MLS. So he did a great job last year. And again, Philadelphia fans should be extremely excited for it.
Yeah, and you had touched on something right there that I actually wanted to ask you, Solana, where you look at his play style. He's coming in. The Philadelphia Union are going to play 4-4-2. I mean, 4-4-2 diamond. That's what they did play. They're going to play a 4-2-2. Bradley Carnell and Ernst Tanner said yesterday in the press conference. And one thing that Bruno made clear was that, yeah, he's used to playing in a setup where he's the lone striker, but he said, he can play well in a two-striker setup. Do you see that as an issue for him, adapting to a style that's going to be all high press, playing with a striker partner? I expect the Union to get a lot of crosses on the left side of the field with Kai Wagner. He looks like he's dominant in the air. One thing I've seen some fans be a little bit negative about online is that, 7 of his 12 goals with Boston River last year came from open player set pieces, while the other 5 came off of penalty kicks. And so some people looked at that as a little bit of a negative issue, calling him a penalty merchant. But I think, how can you say that when you have the key penalty merchant himself in Philadelphia and Daniel Gazdag? But yeah, just seeing how Bruno adjusts from playing in one striker setup to now 2 in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so one of the things where I think Bruno really suffered in when he was playing for Nacional was Nacional right now does not have great service into the box. And so playing as a lone striker, it was very, very tough for him to get goals while he was playing for Nacional. That's probably one of the biggest complaints as a Nacional fan and as an owner of a media channel in Nacional, that we cover Nacional. that's one of the biggest criticisms that we have of this team is there's not enough service into the box. So if you go back and you look at his games, when he gets enough service into the box, he's effective. So I think playing with another striker is going to maybe take a little bit of the pressure to score being that lone striker, and will allow him to be more of that high press, make the defender make a mistake type of forward, and allow that second forward to kind of maybe play the more creative role.
I want to pick your brain, Solana, and I think, a lot of people function in two different ways. Obviously, the way that Todd does in terms of, tactically, where does he fit, where does he go, how does he move, etc. But then there's other people, and maybe I fall into this camp, and it's something I got to work on and get better acquainted with tactics, etc. I played, but my role was just running up and down as a center midfielder. Like, that was about it, just to put stuff out. When you look at Bruno, right now in MLS, who would you compare him to in terms of what he brings physically, mentally, the way he scores, etc.? Who would be a direct comparison that is in the league right now? Or maybe if it isn't, that was in the league, so people can have an idea of what to maybe expect from him.
I would almost compare him to maybe a Brandon Vasquez. Maybe not as tall. I think Brandon might be a little bit taller, but in terms of the amount of intensity that Brandon plays in his game and how dominant he can be in the box when he gets that service, I would compare him. If I needed to compare him to somebody, that's probably who I would compare him to. Maybe it's somebody like a Brandon Vasquez, and even possibly a Jovic, who now is playing against Inter Miami and who was played for the LA Galaxy last year. A young player who's hungry, who's got a big physical frame, and is ready to get as much into the game as he can.
I got to follow up there, and this is another as once he posted, we started seeing the comments of. And this is such a flawed argument, right? Transfer Market says that he is worth X, but the Union reportedly paid this. And then I absolutely love South American team Solana. You and I know this from following them and reporting on them from time to time. They don't hide anything, especially when it's very beneficial to the club. So Nacional was very quick to say $3.4 million plus $600,000 in potential performance bonuses out in the open. What would you say to those that are covering the team as press, but also fans and any party interested in understanding this team better when you see the discrepancy in terms of what he's seen value-wise versus what was paid? How would you ease that tension?
Well, here's what I would say. Atlanta United spent $27 million for Latte La, somebody who is coming from the Championship League, who arguably, yes, it's better than the Uruguayan League, but what really, was he the star of the Championship League? No, he was just an integral part in one of the teams. So if you're really looking at that, I would say Philadelphia got the better deal out of this, because you only spent $3.6 million, which is really, when you come to think about it in terms of what all the other MLS teams have spent this winter, that's not that much money. I mean, Inter Miami, which is the team that I cover the most, they spent about $2 million on Maximiliano Falcón, a defender. They spent, a couple $100,000 on some other players, and they got most of their players on loan deals, which is what they've been trying to do. That's their strategy. Now, you sign a forward, a forward who's going to give you 10 to 15 goals, and you're paying him $3 million. I think that's a steal, especially, like I said, when you have a team like Atlanta who paid $27 million for a striker who I think is probably at the same level, and maybe Latte La might be a little bit faster than him. But overall, I would say $3.6 million plus, if he gets the extra $400,000, I would say that's a great deal, especially with the way the market is or has been this winter in the MLS.
And so I guess, might as well just stick with the topic of, the market value and everything there. And before I answer or ask this question, just people that are joining in live now on YouTube, the Philadelphia Union have officially announced the signing of Bruno Damiani. They paid $3.4 million for him, which now surpasses Mikel Uhre, who was then the highest paid transfer fee paid for a player back in 2022 at $2.8 million. Damiani will be a young DP. He's 22 years old. Last season on loan with Boston River, he appeared in 38 matches, 33 starts, scoring 12 goals, 5 assists, and close to 3,000 minutes. But going back to it, so I noticed before this deal was official between Philadelphia and Nacional for Bruno's signature, he had signed a new contract extension with Nacional until 2027. And the one thing that I mentioned in my latest article was a lot of times when we see this, it doesn't mean when a player signs a contract extension, doesn't mean they're going to see out that whole contract. Teams are doing this to get the max value for this player. We've seen it with Luis Suarez when he left Liverpool for Barcelona. We saw it with Virgil van Dijk when he left Southampton to go to Liverpool. I mean, this happens all the time in soccer. And so is that the case here with Nacional signing Bruno to that contract extension, just maxing out his value?
I don't think that's what it was. I think it was more they really did want to keep him, and he was in the coach's plans. Especially after the great offseason that he had, the coach really wanted to count on him. But when you get an offer for like you did for Bruno, unfortunately, there's just in Uruguay and Nacional, which is a team that is in the red usually all the time, you just can't pass up that offer. I mean, they really were pushing for him to go to Newell's, but the $2 million that they offered wasn't enough. And once they, grabbed that, got the $3.6 million offer, that was obviously more than enough to jump at that and take that. I do also want to remind you, Nacional sold another player to the MLS as well during this transfer window, and that's Lucas Sanabria, another young midfielder, and he went over to the LA Galaxy, and he went for a roughly $7 million. So now you start to see, look, two different Nacional players who were sold in the same window, one for $7 million and one for 3.6. We're going to find out who got the better deal, right?
Yeah, on the topic of the currency, to me, it's interesting how often it gets lost on people. And obviously, this is more of the business side. That exchange rate is just massive for a club like Nacional. You see all these companies, and this is my line of work, but Japanese yen, right? Like so many Japanese companies want to work with the Americans because they can bring in the stronger currency to their market. Because I think I looked today, the Uruguayan peso is basically 23 cents to the dollar. Like they're getting massive value for them. And I gotta admit and sort of ask about this too, because you seem to have a relationship with Bruno Solana. It was really touching, and maybe it's common and we don't hear about it too much, just the nature of how open this whole thing was, and with what was it, Daniel, his agent, going on the Uruguayan radio, and then obviously the different postings, etc. Really touching that Bruno made sure to allocate some of his own fees towards the academy. If you can talk a little bit about maybe his personality, his character. It seems like, again, reading more and more about him and listening to interviews, it seems like this might be a match made in heaven with what Philadelphia is and who he is.
Absolutely. And you kind of jumped the gun on me because I was going to mention that I was saving that for the end. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great that you mentioned it, that he did leave some money for basically for the younger divisions of Nacional. I think it was 200,000 of what he was making. And again, it just talks about his character and how much he really loved Club Nacional de Fútbol and how much they meant to him in his formation as a soccer player. So you don't see that a lot from a lot of players, especially when they leave, with their pass in their own hand. A lot of players don't do that, don't leave money. That he's not the only player that left money. There was another player that also left to an Argentinian team, Argentinos Juniors, Leandro Lozano. He also left about 150 or 200,000 as well of his. So it just goes to show the type of club that Club Nacional de Fútbol is and the type of players that they bring into their institution. So I think Bruno, in terms of personality and character, he's going to fit in beautifully to Philadelphia Union. I remember back in the day when you guys had Eduardo Chacho Coudet as a player, and people were kind of worried, like, what's this Argentinian guy gonna come into Philadelphia, and how is he gonna fit in? But I went to a Philadelphia Union game while he played. I had a conversation with him, and it was interesting. He said at first it was kind of crazy for him to think that he was in Argentina one day and now in Philadelphia, but he adapted to the city well. He loved the people. He loved the fans. And look, I think Bruno is going to feel the exact same way, because the Philadelphia fans, I mean, you guys are a special bunch. You guys really know how to rally yourself around a team and around players. And I think that's why the players are so thankful and they're so friendly with the fans out there.
It was also touching to hear how Bruno remains connected with all of these ex-MLS players and asking them questions. I mean, he even said during the press conference, I think, like, or one of the videos, like, yeah, the last thing I asked this player was, like, how does rent work in America? You know, like such a small detail that, like, you know, it's nice to have that support system. And obviously with his agent, as I learned more and more about him, having a son who actually works out of Philadelphia. So, like, the city, his camp is no stranger to the city. So it's comforting to know that there's that connection and not just, you know, sight unseen sort of going into a city like Philadelphia, which can be pretty dangerous for people.
Absolutely, and especially where the stadium is located at, it's not the safest place ever.
Yeah, they're in Chester. I was going to mention though, I mean, going from a stadium that holds 36,000 people to Subaru Park that's 18,500, and yeah, maybe if they have some of those sides open and go up to 20,000. But yeah, do you think that's going to be a shock for Bruno, just seeing how much smaller the stadiums are in MLS compared to, you know, what they are in Uruguay? I know there are some stadiums that only sit like 5,000. I know Boston River doesn't have a huge stadium, but that's got to be a decent shock where you're playing in some massive stadiums in Uruguay, and then you come to MLS where it's 20,000, 21,000.
Yeah, I mean, usually the games that would get fans are when the teams play Nacional or Peñarol. Those are the two teams that really draw in Uruguay. Other than that, you have Defensor and Danubio, who also draw a decent amount. But really, you know, when Bruno would have played for Boston River against Nacional or against Peñarol, that's where he's going to have the 25, 30,000 fans. When he was playing against some of the other teams, he was probably dealing with 5,000, 6,000 fans. So I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. Now, he did just come from playing two Clásicos against Peñarol that had 60,000 people at both games. And then they ended up playing a third one, which he was on the roster. He didn't end up playing, obviously, because of the deal that was being talked about. So maybe, you know, when Philadelphia, I mean, and I don't know who your guys' biggest rival is. I'm assuming DC United or somebody like that, maybe one of the New York teams. I don't know. But maybe when he gets to a rivalry game, maybe he'll get a little bit shocked at the that not as much passion as what is showed normally in Uruguay.
All right, we'll go one more for myself, one more Jose, and then we'll let you go. Jose, I'll let you go ahead.
So you go ahead. I need to listen for this announcement quick.
That's cool. That's cool. So one thing that I did want to touch on at the beginning of the show, and that's fine that we jumped around there. I mean, a lot of good stuff covered here, is just looking at Bruno's time through the academy and then to the reserves team, and then finally to the main team itself. I mean, just reading up on him, it looked like he'd had a couple trials at the age of 7, and then they didn't work out, including at Nacional. He eventually has another trial, gets accepted into the academy at 17, plays for the U19s, then goes and plays for the B team in 2021, and then eventually plays for the first team in 2023. Can you just go ahead and talk about, you know, this rise where, you know, at a young age, doesn't sign for a huge club, doesn't sign for a professional team, but keeps at it, eventually gets into Nacional. They loan him out to Boston Rivers, where he was the leading goal scorer. And then, look, you had mentioned it earlier, they planned on keeping him. He started the first 2 games of the season, but then the offer was too good from Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, look, it goes to show, you know, especially for all the young kids out there, what it means to stick to the sport. And to keep working hard. Obviously, like you mentioned, he had a trial with Nacional at 7 years old, and they said no. In Uruguay, there's a bunch of soccer, a bunch of football all over the place for young kids to play. You know, and I might get in trouble for this, but Nacional doesn't have the best academy in Uruguay either. So the fact that maybe he didn't come up in that young academy might have been a blessing in disguise. I would say they do have some of the best formative teams. You know, like U17, U19, and a good reserve team. But in terms of the younger ages, they usually come from Defensor or Montevideo City Torque or something like that. So it doesn't surprise me that he didn't get a first trial with Nacional, but then came back and Nacional again. They will, they show that they're willing to bring in talent. So obviously they saw something in him. They brought him up in their young divisions, as you mentioned, and he debuted, like you said, in 2023. He also had a couple of goals in 2023 during his debut season. He scored a goal in the Copa Libertadores, also had an assist. So this is something, this is a player who, even at a young age, and now we're talking about 2 years ago, he was 20 years old when he scored that goal. So he's experienced some pretty big highs as a young player already. And yet again, he's only 22 years old. So he still has tons to grow.
At Jose.
Honestly, I don't have a question. More than anything, I'm excited to see him. I'm excited to, when the time comes, finally sit down with him and, have a good 25, 30-minute chat in his native Spanish and just let him talk, right? Because I think he's the way that some of these signings work out for Philadelphia. Obviously, we don't have to rehash Julian Carranza and what he's done, and obviously did even this week. It's like maybe there is something to be said about what the front office can do when they hit, because when they hit very, very well. They may bet small compared to others across the league, but when they bet and their chips are right, they really do uncover some gems. And everything I'm hearing from you and reading and listening, it sounds like this might be one of those bets that will pay off. And I don't know, this could be a guy that genuinely within 2 seasons could be in Europe doing bigger and better things than MLS. So we'll have to see. It's exciting. So Solana, thank you so much for the time. Congratulations on getting that report out, and we'll see. Eager to keep in touch and follow this process, or this progress, and his progress.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say thank you so much, Solana, for joining. And for our listeners that are either listening live or they're listening back on the podcast feed, where can people follow you on social media?
Absolutely. You can follow me at Danny Solana, DANI Solana5, on all my social media. Like these guys said, I love trying to break some Nacional news and, reporting on Inter Miami. Really, any sort of soccer I love talking about. So, and just to let you guys know, I saved a screenshot of Tommy, giving me credit just in case. It rarely happens, like you guys said. So I had to save the screenshot of it. But I appreciate you guys for all the support and for having me on. And Jose, just as a heads up, if you take some mate, the conversation will go nice and smooth. I promise.
No, these guys, everybody who watches Todd or reads my own content, they know that I'm not so much a coffee person in the morning. I'm more of a mate person in the morning, and maybe a couple of sips throughout the afternoon. Once it gets into the evening, that's where I have to ease off. Otherwise, I'm not going to bed. But I gotta say to Bruno, arriba bolso. No, isn't that it?
That's it. Arriba bolso.
There we go. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate you.
All right, Solana, thanks. Have a good night. All right, so there was Daniel Solana talking Bruno Damiani with Jose and myself, and yeah, I'm super excited for this signing, Jose. This is a big deal for the Philadelphia Union, making this official, $3.4 million, and it's crazy just seeing the Union in their existence. That $3.4 million is their highest transfer fee paid ever, and I think Kevin Kincaid went and did a deep dive, and that transfer fee doesn't even break the top 100 highest fees paid in MLS. And yeah, it tells you right there just how far MLS has come. And a lot of those teams are FC Cincinnati, LA Galaxies, you're into Miami's. But I mean, it is nice to see the Philadelphia Union finally go out there and spend this money. And something I had said a lot on this podcast in the past is like, yeah, Julian Carranza, huge player for the Philadelphia Union, cost into Miami $6 million, and the Union were never going to pay $6 million, and maybe there will be a time and a place in the future that they pay that. But I do always believe that there is more Julian Carranzas out there, and maybe Bruno Damiani is the next Julian Carranza for the Philadelphia Union. I think Julian's a fantastic player, but I think the talent-wise, there are so many talented players in South America, and seeing the Philadelphia Union go in South America twice this window, getting Jan Glavinovic and now getting Bruno Damiani, yeah, I'm happy with the business that the Union did throughout the transfer window, and that kind of takes us to the last talking point on the show, we have 15 minutes left before Jose has to get on a train, head back to Philadelphia. So I appreciate the comments coming on. Sorry that we really haven't read any of them, showed them on the show tonight just because we're on a time constraint. But yeah, looking at
Sorry.
the age of this Philadelphia Union squad, Jose, 23.4 years old, 30 players signed to this roster. They have until this Friday to get roster compliant. We know the Philadelphia Union need an international roster slot because of Damiani. He is taking up a slot. How the Philadelphia Union get that? Could they go out and trade for one? We've seen them go for $175,000 to $200,000. Did the Union loan a player out that's won an international slot? A lot of possibilities. Still plenty of time for the Union to get something done by the February 21st deadline. I know that's on Friday. But look, Union had to have been thinking about, okay, what pieces we can move. And I'm sure there's probably moves behind the scenes being close to being finalized. Ernst Tanner did tell us on the press conference that there could potentially be another player coming on into this squad. We'll see what happens. But for you guys who didn't check the interview live, the press conference live, there's Ernst Tanner talking about, yeah, we feel like we got this squad at a good age now, and there could potentially be another signing coming in.
All our new signings are in their best performance age, or are coming to their best performance age. Yeah. And that's what we need to do. I mean, not too many weeks ago, I was sitting here and telling you about the overhaul of the roster. And that's what we have pretty much completed. And maybe there is something to do in addition. But we need to see what we can get. And also what fits in the budget, because, in this moment, it's getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah, and Ernst is right there. I mean, the budget has to be getting lesser and lesser. I mean, I'd imagine they use probably majority of, if not all their GAM, and TAM, on their players like Jacob Glesnes, Kai Wagner, Andre Blake, making sure those guys don't hit the DP threshold. But then the Philadelphia Union also are going to go ahead and use a lot of that GAM on players as well. And so, yeah, the budget charge, they got to be less and less. And that makes me wonder, did they not have enough GAM to go out and get an international roster slot? Do they loan somebody out? And then Ernst Tanner there at the end says, yeah, maybe we bring somebody else in. And if they bring in another player, could it potentially be another international player? I don't know. The possibilities, there's a lot of possibilities there. Like I said, roster compliance is this Friday, the 21st. You have to be roster compliant before your first game of the season. Still time for the Union to make things happen. There's a question here by Colton. He said, can he not play until we get an international slot? Technically, the Union just have to designate, okay, what the roster looks like. And so I'll use Macania for an example. If they say, okay, we're going to go ahead and give Bruno that slot that Macania is playing, that means that Bruno would be eligible and Macania wouldn't. But regardless, the Union have to go out here, because I can't see the Union loaning out a Macania, Jesus Bueno. I've seen some people say, yeah, he disappointed last year. The Union are going to do everything possible to go out there and get an international roster slot, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree with you. And if anything, I would argue that my working theory of Oliver Semla being the player that's going to get loaned out, or it's a player that would make the most sense. And again, I don't mean this as a, hit on him or anything, just a goalkeeper who's second string that also takes an international spot. It's kind of tough to justify when you have your record-breaking signing sitting in the wings waiting to have an international spot. And the reason I say that that's falling apart is because he was part of the B-roll that was shared with press today, announcing tomorrow's press conference with Quinn Sullivan and Bradley Cornell, which, Todd, is this going to be common now to get a player and a coach? It used to be the Jim Curtin show, all of these match day -1 or -2 press conferences. So, yeah, I think they'll be compliant. For again, as you mentioned, Todd, like for all we know, they picked up the phone earlier today and they have it done and dusted, and tomorrow someone at the league's office just has to rubber stamp it and pass it along, and it's done. So I'm sure more to come, and maybe, just maybe, there's an announcement right before the press conference. And then the final point I'll stress that you mentioned is, for as much, I don't want to say hatred, but dislike as Ernst Tanner gets, he has been nothing but truthful and transparent this offseason in terms of coming through with all of his promises that he made during the end of season press conference. So I take him for his word that there could be some more business to be done, though it seems like it would be very, very tight with the way that this roster is, as well as what he said that an ideal roster would be 26, 27. Maybe that's not going to be the way that I don't know. I'm intrigued to see how it goes, but it's just acknowledging that he has been unbelievably honest so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think fans should give him credit for that. I mean, he's a man of his word. I mean, he said everything that was going to happen. He said, we're going to bring in a defender. They did that with Glavinovic. They said a midfielder with Lukic. Fort, they've now done that with Bruno. Again, I'm going to pull up a picture here that we showed last episode. That is the Union's current roster here, 30 players. If you look at this, it's 7 forwards. And Ernst Tanner did mention during his press conference on Tuesday that it was always the understanding of the strikers that they have, some of them that signed deals are going to play with Union 2 this season. I would imagine that's Eddie Davis, Marcus Anderson. Could you see go back down to Union 2? I think potentially. Nelson Pierre, I think the Union will probably try and move on from him, whether that's a loan or a sale. Though I do wonder how many clubs would be interested in buying Nelson Pierre, who didn't have a great season on loan with Charlotte Independence and USL 1. You look at the midfield depth. I think the midfield's fine, in my opinion. I mean, again, we said it at the beginning of the show that Bradley Cornell and Ernst Tanner both said that they're going to be playing a lot of 4-2-2, and they're going to play a 4-2-3-1 at times as well, but mostly a 4-2-2-2. And yeah, I mean, if that's the case, yeah, I think you're fine in the midfield. Honestly, I saw a lot of fans, on social media say, yeah, well, you don't have great players coming off the bench, but I'm intrigued, right? Seeing a Mikal Ua come off the bench, going at tired legs. Again, we're rehashing stuff that we talked about last week. I think Jesus Bueno, we saw him score goals coming off the bench, can definitely be an option coming off the bench. Alejandro Bedoya scored a goal against Montreal coming off the bench and preseason. And so, I mean, Bedoya told us last year, right? You look at the offensive numbers. Are we still producing offensively for this team? And I think you give Bedoya a limited role coming off that bench the last 20, 25 minutes. Yeah, he's still going to give you something defensively, but more specifically offensively if you need a goal. So we know with Bradley Cornell, he's going to give chances to these young players. We know that, there's going to be rotation. He's not scared to rotate. And I think if the Union were to add one more position, a player in one more position, in my opinion, I think that would probably be center back. Where would you like to see the Union go with one more spot if they do, in fact, get something done?
What if it was a player that can play center back and center defensive mid? Someone who has that two-way ability. I don't know. It would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that would go a long way with this squad, right? Just having players that are versatile. They can play in multiple different positions. And that's kind of been the MO with Ernst Tanner ever since he's taken over. There's been players he's signed that can play in multiple different spots. And so that would be intriguing to look at a player that can play as a defensive midfielder and also play as a center back. So I would not be against that at all. For people that are listening to this live on YouTube, people that are listening back from the RSS, the RSS feed, this is not our typical 1 hour show that we normally do. Jose is catching a train back from New York City to Philadelphia. And frankly, I have some stuff I want to get done in terms of writing my predictions. I don't think I'm going to do a prediction show this year. I know I've done that the last couple of years because I really want you guys to read my work, and so I'll have that out either Friday night or Saturday morning for you guys to check out before the game against Orlando City. But yeah, I'm really excited with the work that Ernst Tanner has done with this team. There's a very, very young squad. Lots of players are going to get chances, and I'm looking forward to the game against Orlando City this Saturday, and then the home opener the following week against FC Cincinnati. But as always, Jose, where can people find you on social media?
At Jose R. Nuñez 91 and MLS.com eventually, which is such a weird thing to say out loud.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, dude, congrats. And I got a lot of love on this show when you announced it last week. Got love on the show again tonight. And yeah, Twitter, people seem to be very, very happy for you. Well deserved, dude. And couldn't have happened to a better person. I mean, who was grinding as hard as Jose was last season with the Philadelphia Union news and continue with this season. So Philadelphia Union fans, very, very fortunate to have you on the beat, Jose, breaking all sorts of news, even though it may upset a couple people. But hey, look, The fans love it, and we love whenever you get the opportunity to share that stuff on the shows or your social media platforms. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcasts of The Free Kick. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/freekickpod, and make sure you check out my writing or the YouTube videos and the podcast all in one place on thefreekick.substack.com. Again, looking forward to this game, 7:30 against Orlando City. I'm be sure to have a match preview article out probably Friday. Could potentially have it out on Thursday, but I like to wait for those injury reports to come out. We do know that Wilder Cartagena, the midfielder for Orlando City, is out for the rest of the season towards Achilles, I believe, in the preseason game for Orlando City. That's a big loss right there. And regardless of whatever happens against Orlando City, don't go in panicking if the Union lose or get a draw this first game. Ernst Tanner had stressed that too at his press conference too, that look, we can't really judge the first couple games. And I
What
saw
he was like, it's basically preseason or something like that. It was like
that. And
it was some interesting sentence.
Sandra Schwartz for New York Red Bull said the same thing today in his press conference. So I mean, like these couple games, they matter, right? You want to get as many points as you can, but it's a long season. We all know that. And when more than half of the league makes the playoff, and it's not time to panic if things don't go the way that you expect them to go in the very first game of the season. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is a Free Kick Podcast.